Books, books. I like books. I'm gonna read them all.
Hi readers, Chris here. Welcome to my channel where I review fantasy, Stephen King, all sorts of books, and today I'm going to be doing my February wrap-up and my March TBR. February was kind of a mixed bag for me in terms of reading. I did DNF the first book I've ever DNF'd in like 10-15 years, and then for the most part, I enjoyed my other books, but I don't think any of them were perfect, except for maybe one. There is a clear favorite, and the rest I enjoyed, but I still have problems with. So, yada, yada, yada. Before I dive in, just want to say a quick shout out thank you to everyone who voted on my community tab. It does seem like Bookshelf Tour has won. So that is how I'm going to be celebrating reaching 400 subscribers. Yes, I'm going to be doing a giveaway and a bookshelf tour. So I'm going to be filming that over the next few weeks. So hopefully before the end of the month, I can get that out. So I'll look forward to that. But let me now dive into my rankings of February. So obviously at the bottom of my list is Witches Steeped in Gold, the book I DNF'd. I DNF'd it, so it's kind of doesn't count as being part of the ranking, but it does. I already did like a whole deep dive into my thoughts about this book. That was in one of my other videos, which I will link somewhere over here in case you're interested in learning more. Otherwise, I'm just going to put this one to the side and keep going. So my sixth favorite book of February is actually going to be the book that I replaced Witches Steeped in Gold with, and that is Ballad and Dagger by Daniel Jose Older. I picked this one up because A, I've had it for a very long time. It was one of the earlier Owl Crate books that I've gotten, and I haven't read it. And B, I was really looking for something that didn't have white lead characters. So that's how I ended up with this one. And while I did enjoy this book more than Witches Steeped in Gold, I did read the whole thing. I didn't DNF. I actually got some similar vibes. So the whole thing about this book is that there is this magical island called San Madrigal, and this island mysteriously sank, and now all the residents from this island are basically living in a suburb of New York. Like, even though that's where they live, they don't really feel like it's their home. So it very much has this like magical immigrant type story. So we have a young boy, and there's kind of this prophecy that maybe the island will come back because there are these gods, and children can be initiates of these gods. And honestly, the plot kind of lost me a little bit. And I know this is only part one to a much larger story, so maybe they explain it better in more volumes. The other thing about this one is that this is a collaboration with Rick Riordan, who does the Percy Jackson series. And I can very much see this book has definite Percy Jackson vibes. Like, young boy discovers he's a god, adventures ensue. Like, it's very much cut from the same cloth. It's just that in this tale, our character is Latin American, basically. So again, I do think that this book could be really fantastic for a certain niche audience, for a certain demographic. I just don't think that I'm in that demographic. I don't think I'm in that niche. So unfortunately, I couldn't connect with this one as much as I wanted to. And I did want to, especially in the beginning. I thought it was a really interesting setup. I just couldn't connect with it completely. So again, I think this book would be great for someone else. It wasn't great for me. I didn't hate it by any means. I don't think it was for me. That's all. My fifth favorite book of February is going to be Wolves of the Calla by Stephen King. Yes, a Stephen King book is very low down on my list this month. And that's because So this is book 5 in his Dark Tower series. And the previous book, book 4, I loved book 4. Loved it. So this one I just didn't love as much. And I thought I knew where the story was going, because in the beginning of this book, it kind of sets up these 2 different storylines. In one storyline, we have Roland and his gang and his friends. They're on this quest for the Dark Tower, and they come across this random town that's having a problem. This town is being terrorized by these wolves who steal their children and then, like, return their children to them, but they're, like, basically not even their children anymore. They're mentally gone, they're physically different, and this town lives in terror. So when they see Roland and his gang, they're like, oh my god, you have to help us. So that's like one storyline. The other storyline in this book, at least in the beginning, is that Roland and his friends also use these time-traveling wonky doors to travel to New York City, where there is a mysterious rose in this mysterious lot that they feel they need to protect because it's somehow related to the Dark Tower. So you kind of have these 2 different things going on. However, about like halfway through the book, they kind of drop the other storyline and they completely focus on this storyline with the wolves. And while I do like it as like its own adventure story, I am struggling a bit to see how it fits into the larger narrative. Like, if this was just a standalone, I think I would enjoy it because it's this adventure tale, heroics. It very much has that Western feel that a lot of these Dark Tower books type have. But when I think about its place in this larger, like, epic fantasy adventure going on, I'm like, I don't really see what the point is. I don't really see what the point of this side adventure was. And maybe I will see it later on. Maybe it'll all make sense. If you've read the series, let me know. But that's just how I feel at the moment. My 4th favorite book of February is going to be House of Flamin's Shadow by Sarah J. Maas. Even though this book is number 4 and not higher, I still really enjoyed this one. Like, this series, Crescent City, has not been my favorite. But I keep going with it, A, because I'm a sucker to how popular it is. I want to know. But B, I actually really do like the world building in these books. Like, if you like fantasy at all, the world building in these books are amazing, and it's fun, and it's great, and it's over the top, and there's so many great characters. My biggest problem with these books are, A, I don't really care for the main character, Bryce. I don't think she's a great person. Number 2, I really don't like all the sex and language in these books. This book in particular, I feel like it dialed that back a lot. Dialed it back a lot. It's still in there. Don't worry. If you're someone that likes that, don't worry. It's still in there. But there is no sex in the first half of the book. And there's very minimal language, I would say, minimal. There is some sex and language in this, like, the later half of the book, but I feel like she stepped it back a little bit, and I actually appreciated that. And even when there is a sex scene, it was like a page long, which, again, for this series that's crazy. They're usually many, many, many pages. So I appreciated that. I appreciated the stepping back from the sex and the vulgarity. I appreciate the world building. And yeah, even though, again, it's still not my favorite series, I think that this particular book, this 3rd one, might actually be my favorite book in the Crescent City series. My 3rd favorite book in February is going to be Court by Tracy Wolff. This is the 4th book in her Crave series. Some of you may remember that book 3, the one right before this, wasn't my favorite. I had some issues with it, and I'm happy to say that Court got this series back on track. The reason I like this series is because it's ridiculous. It doesn't take itself too seriously. It's over the top, and it's just fun And I feel like this book got back to the fun. It got back to the fun. It got back to the ridiculous. We have young girl, vampire, they fall in love. There's all these magical creatures. There's a freaking war going on with the vampire king. There's so much. There's gargoyles. There's a whole gargoyle army. Like, this book is over the top. And I do have to say that the ending was ridiculous. The ending of this book is so over the top, so ridiculous, but I loved it. I loved it because, again, this book does not take itself too seriously. It knows what it is, it leans into it, and I appreciate that. My second favorite book of February is going to be The Lost Book of the White by Cassandra Clare and Wesley Chu. This is the second and final book in the Eldest Curses duology. This book features one of my all-time favorite couples in any book everywhere, Alec Lightwood and Magnus Bane. Alec is a shadow hunter. That means he's a human that kind of has like superhuman powers so that he can fight demons and stuff. Magnus is a warlock. And when the two of these men meet each other, they fall in love. They just have the best relationship. Book one really focused on the early days of their relationship when they had just started dating. They took a vacation together for the first time. So there was this like innocence and shyness about their relationship as they're trying to, learn about each other. This book, on the flip side, takes place much later in their relationship. They've been together for a while. They have an adoptive son together. And I have to say, I don't like this one as much as the first one. I still like it. I still really like this book. That's why it's so high up on my list. I love Alec and Magnus. I love the adventures they have together. Again, I love their relationship so much, so much. However, I do think that the first book, I personally liked more. I liked seeing that innocence and that shyness. I really enjoyed that. So again, even though I really like this book, I love Alec and Magnus, I like the adventure they go on, I just prefer the first one. But again, still a great read. And finally, that brings me to my favorite book of February, Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries. Wow, I knew going in that so many people had said good things about this book, but I was not prepared for how much I would like it. So again, a big shout out. Thank you to Nicole for recommending this to me. Thank you so much. I absolutely loved it. I know there's a sequel. I can't wait to read it. But basically, for anyone who doesn't know what this book is about, Emily is a professor, and she is in the process of basically creating this encyclopedia for all the fairies. So she's very much a student in that sense, where even though she's so smart and she knows so much, she's still always wanting to learn more. And I really love that about her character, because she is self-sufficient and she is intelligent and she knows how to get herself out of situations, but she never wants to stop learning. And I think that's really cool. So she goes to this remote village to try and learn some additional stuff about the fairies for her encyclopedia. She gets pulled into all sorts of hijinks. And I know, Nicole, you had mentioned this when you talked about this book, but some people, when they think of fairies, they think of, Tinkerbell, little cute, pretty fairies that, faith, pixie dust, whatever the saying is. But the fairies in this book are, not all of them, but a lot of them are they have a very mischievous side. I don't want to say evil because it's not evil, but they're diabolical. They don't look at humans as fellow people that they share the world with. They see them as cattle, as toys, as things to be played with, discarded. The fairies are, they're a little, I guess I will say the word evil. They're a little evil. They're dark. They're sinister. They're not cutesy. And this book, it looks cutesy, but the stuff that happens in here is not cutesy all the time. And I really love that. Okay, so that was February. Now it's time to move on and talk about March. And When I was putting together my March TBR over the past couple of days, I had a moment where I looked at it and I was like, this isn't quite what I wanted. And I would love to know if anyone has ever felt that way. That's not quite what I wanted. But without further ado, let me jump in. I'll tell you why in a minute. But my first book in March, of course, is going to be my reader recommendation. And that is The Twisted Ones by T. Kingfisher. This is my second T. Kingfisher book. I previously read Nettle and Bone, which I really enjoyed. It didn't blow my mind away, but I did enjoy it. So when Bad is read or recommended this to me, I was super excited. So thank you, Bad, for recommending this to me. I can already tell by the cover that this is going to be a creepy story, a dark tale, a dark fantasy, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. Next up, I'm continuing my Stephen King journey with Song of Susannah. This is the 6th book in the Dark Tower series. Again, I hope it's better than Wolves of the Calla, which I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it, so I'm hoping that this one will be a bit better. Next up, I have my adult fantasy of the month, and I am super excited about this one, The Warm Hands of Ghosts by Katherine Arden. This book just came out last month, and when I found out that Katherine Arden was writing a new book, I knew I had to get it instantly. Some of you may remember her Winter Night trilogy is an absolute favorite of mine. The 3rd book in that series, Winter of the Witch, was my favorite book of 2023. So I have very high expectations for this one. They might be too high at this point, but she hasn't let me down yet, so I am keeping my fingers crossed. Next up, I have my rando pick. This is where I just pick a random book on my shelf, and here is where I ran into some trouble. Even though I haven't shown them, every book on my TBR is an author I have read before. And one of my goals this year is to read a new author every month. So I needed to find an author I hadn't read before, number one. Another one of my goals was to try and find something off my backlist. So I'm looking at books that have been on my shelf for 10, 15 years that I haven't read, number 2. And then number 3, well, I don't even, actually no, there's no number 3. So the book I ended up picking out, which I had on my list as wanting to read this year, I just didn't want to read it this soon in the year, and that is The Vampire Diaries by L.J. Smith. I didn't want to read this one so early in the year because I just read A Vampire Story last month in court. So I didn't want to read another one that soon, but again, I needed an old book from an author I hadn't read before, and I don't have that many of them. So that is how I ended up with this one. And now I'm already looking at my TBR. I have The Twisted Ones, which is a dark story. Dark Tower, that's a dark story. Warm Hands of Ghosts, I assume that's going to be a dark story. And now I have Vampire Diaries, another dark story. So I'm like, my TBR is way too dark this month. But luckily, I do have a YA fantasy that is helping to balance that out. And that is The Heir by Kiera Cass. What did I say? The Heir. The Heir? The Heir. So this is the 4th book in her Selection series. The Selection is originally a trilogy, and then there's another set of books. So this is the 1st in the 2nd set of books, or the 4th book, whatever you want to call it. But obviously, this book is a lot lighter in tone than all of these other dark ones. It's a YA, fantasy, romance, dystopia kind of mixture. We have a young girl. She's ready to become queen. In the original series, it was a bunch of females that were competing to win the heart of the prince. In this book, though, there's a bunch of men that are competing for the heart of the princess. So I love that change. Again, I really enjoyed the first 3 books, so I'm hoping that I will enjoy this one as well. And finally, that brings me to my book box book pick. And some of you may know that I've kind of been having not the best luck with Owl Crate books recently. So I decided to pick one of the adult books that they've sent me. Take a break from the YA, do an adult book. So this is actually the first one I ever got, Immortal Longings by Chloe Gong. She wrote these violent delights. I cannot talk today for some reason. These Violet Delights. So, Immortal Longings. Now, I am like a couple, 2, 3, 4 chapters in at this point, and this book is marketed as an adult fantasy. But I gotta say, and someone, if you've read this, please tell me if I'm wrong, this book is giving me sci-fi feels, like not fantasy. It's giving me sci-fi feels because there is technology a lot that's being talked about, and then the people in this world have the ability to jump into other people's bodies, which I know there was a movie about that. I can't remember what it is, but it's definitely a sci-fi movie. And even the cover of this book gives me like Blade Runner vibes, which again is a sci-fi movie. So maybe I'll feel differently, once I get into it. But right now, I feel like this is science fiction, not fantasy. But maybe that's just me. I could be completely wrong. So I will let you know in my next wrap up what ends up happening with this one. So there you have it. There's everything I read in February, everything I'm going to be reading in March. So now I want to know from you, what was your favorite book in February? What are you going to be reading in March? Have you read anything that I've mentioned? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments section below. And as always, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not already, please subscribe to my channel for more bookish stuff coming your way soon. All right, everyone. Happy reading.